Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nathan with the Birds and the Leaves, and I am here with my wife, Kim. Kim, how are you today?
I'm good today.
It is a nice day out. I'm looking out the window. It's nice and sunny, and which is good because the last couple of days have been kind of cloudy. It is cold, though. So
And rainy and snowy and sleety and
well, we have, for Texas. What is that, like 30 minutes of that?
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we are continuing in our series of our story, and to give you a little background on what that means, we decided that if we were going to continue in this endeavor of creating this podcast that speaks to our experience in ministry, we decided it might be best for each of you to get to know us. Now, if you've been listening and you've been following along, you know that we have done part 1 for Kim and I both. And right now we're going to kick into part 2 of Kim, and then soon after we will be releasing part 2 of my story. And we figured these are about 2 to 3 parters, 4 parters maybe, and then we'll get into some of the things that, because of our story, filter into our ministry life. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, cool. So right now we're going to hand it over to Kim and just let her go with part 2. If you guys remember the part 1, we kind of we're in her college years, getting ready to go into grad school, I believe. We're getting ready to head off to college. We never got to college years,
right.
So she's getting ready to head off to college, and she's going to pick up there. Yeah. Kim, go ahead and just kind of start with your college years.
Sure.
You know, you've moved on from high school, you've lived with your dad, and now it's time for you to kind of go out on your own.
Right. So I actually stayed with my dad for another 2 years. I went to Richland Community College, which is in Dallas, and focused on just getting my associate's degree. I had a pretty great time there, went to a church that was very active on the campus. They decided to change focus halfway through, and I disagreed with them. So as kind of my last semester or 2 that I was at Richland, I also did not really attend much. They chose to go from there to a major university in the area for a bigger crowd. And I kind of disagreed with that whole choice and process and how that all went down. So I didn't go much longer to that church after that decision.
Was this more of like a vision kind of thing, or you just didn't like how they were doing it?
This was more of a why they were moving. They were moving because they wanted bigger numbers.
Oh, I gotcha.
But it was not based on shepherding or ministering to anyone. It was just a numbers game.
Okay, so there wasn't really about a discipleship thing, or you
No.
just wanted to increase, which, you know, to be honest with you, increase in numbers isn't bad, but you know, upheaval and moving an entire ministry just because, you know.
And there was an active ministry there of 60 plus college students, so it was hard to see those students. They were just leaving them completely behind with no support system.
So they were kind of, you're on your own. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I moved to UNT, which is 30 minutes outside of Dallas, more or less. And
that's in Denton.
In Denton, North Dallas type area. Went to UNT for an undergraduate in education, child development, if that matters for anyone.
If you don't know what UNT is, that's the University of North Texas.
Right. Yes. And focused on child development and working through that program, which fit my skill sets pretty well as far as wanting to love on kids and engaging them in different ways. While there, going through some classes, they encouraged us to get a minor, and my minor ended up being a minor in counseling.
Oh, okay.
So I really enjoyed that. I focused on, even as a minor, doing animal-assisted therapy, which is bringing animals, be it a horse or dog, into the counseling setting and learning how to professionally work with them inside of that. So there's some insurance issues that go along with it. You have to make sure you have lots of insurance, and you have to make sure that you understand how it correlates with the process you're putting clients through. This is not just bringing an animal that you have in your home into the setting of a counseling session.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So there was some learning curve on that, just because I didn't expect to get into that and really enjoy it. So I did spend a lot of my time, my senior year, if you want to call it that, because college is a little goofy sometimes, working on that and perfecting that for my counseling purposes.
Well, and when you talk about animal-assisted therapy, often people hear or think of equine therapy and things like
Absolutely.
that. Did you have a broader experience in that, or was there just kind of a specialty you focused in, like a specific animal? Or?
Yeah, so I focused on dogs was my primary focus. I did have a season that I went to the equine therapy and learned how to do that, because that, to be truthful, is one of the most popular forms. So, and there is some great training that goes along with that.
Okay.
I am very uncomfortable with horses.
Yeah. Me too.
So,
I don't like horses.
So I did not last very long doing equine therapy. I understand how to apply it and how to work with kids through that. It is not what I am best at.
It wouldn't be mine either.
Yeah.
Now, so there's specialized training that goes along with just even working with dogs.
So within the counseling setting, there's specialized training that really needs to happen. And when you're doing your internship, you really should be taking an animal, whatever animal you choose to do that with, into the counseling setting and getting supervised help from someone who's a professional to learn how to do that. And they're audio taped, videotaped, whatever's given permission to do. And you work through how to integrate that.
Now, is this the same kind of training, like for the animal, is this the same kind of training as, say, like a guide dog, or is it generally more? So
it's going to be a step in between. If you were to have a dog that you used for emotional support, and they had professional training, it would be in between that. And by professional, I mean someone comes in and teaches your dog for like a year how to help you with emotional support, not your own type of training. So in between that and a dog who works professionally, like in the field of police or that works in the field of seeing eye guide dogs, those are all whisked away for a year, and you never, you don't ever have anything to do with them. They essentially pick you. There's this whole process. If you have a dog that is a true professional dog that works in the counseling field, they have specialized training that often you have been trained to do. So there's training on the owner's part. And then there's training for the dog that is a little specialized, and they have to go to courses. They have to have insurance. There's this whole liability insurance. There's this whole process.
Okay. So there's, well, it's not just throwing a dog into a room.
No, it should not be. And if you catch yourself in that situation, it is not professional.
So you're there, you're doing animal assisted therapy, at least in your senior year, and you've decided you want to go into professional counseling. What would be the next step? I mean, what was the next step?
So for me, I didn't have an animal yet. So then I specifically targeted what type of animal I wanted. It was a yellow lab. And I searched for a yellow lab for probably 6 months to find the one that really fit that need in society.
And you found a good one, because she ultimately became our dog after we got married. And
I guess my one warning for anybody wanting to go into that is the dog's ability to serve in that manner and work in that manner oftentimes is less than what your ability to serve will be. So either their work week is shorter, like my Carly only worked 2 to 3 days a week, or they only last 2 to 5 years, depending.
She did not work her entire.
No, she really
life.
only worked 2 years, and I started seeing a decrease in her attachment to you and I, and so I pulled her out of the counseling sessions because it was too much on her.
It's a lot.
And once we pulled her out, she was fine, but that's part of the training, is being in tune with your animal.
So in this time, because we've been married 15 years, in this time where you've moved on and you're actually pursuing a master's degree, right? You're going to go off and do that. You also come across some upheaval, quite a bit. And, this is the story that when you tell it, you often get voted as the greatest story, the greatest personal story of all time.
Yes.
Of course, not a fun one, but
it was very hard.
It's one that, when you meet someone, this is the last thing you expect them to tell you. And I can remember when you told me thinking, whoa.
To be fair, when I told you, it was still a very active situation.
Yes, it was still a very active situation, but it's not what you expect your new girlfriend to, hey, let's share our pasts or share, where we're coming from. And all of a sudden, this is the one you get. So,
right.
So not to freak everybody out. It's a really good story. And it's an impressive story just from the fact of how God watched over you and cared for you and all of that. And so why don't you just kind of let us know what that is?
So I'll go over I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, and maybe sometime we can do a show.
I think there's more in there, but it might be a different topic.
Yeah. I think it's a great story about God providing and God protecting in a time when it could have been bad. So before I met Nathan, about 2 years, I met a gentleman while I was working out at a gym near my home.
Mm-hmm.
And we had lots of fun together. We enjoyed each other. We dated for 6 months, 9 months or so.
Okay, so it was a pretty good, lengthy dating relationship, at least for your age.
Yeah, it was a very long time. And after 6 to 9 months, I really don't remember the timeline.
Yeah.
I got a call on my phone one day telling me that this gentleman had been arrested for fraudulent behavior.
Okay.
And the story gets
you think fraudulent behavior, you think like he's cashing or he's writing bad checks or something like that.
Right. It turns out that he had 2 previous wives. He had 2 children I was unaware of. He was living under an assumed name.
Yes, he had.
For those of you who don't, I know many of you have not had to be through not many of you have had to go through this, but an assumed name means they're using someone else's name that's not theirs.
Yeah, they're not just making up a name.
Right.
They've actually acquired everything that they have to create a new identity.
Right. It was his dead brother's name. His brother had died young, like 8 or 9, in a tragic accident. He had taken his kids and essentially held them hostage.
Yeah.
Robbed a bank. There was lots of different scenarios.
Yeah, I remember us talking for the first time, and it was just like as soon as you would say one part of the story, you'd add another thing he'd done, and it just kind of kept snowballing.
Yeah, it was very layered. So long story short, because of his felonies that he was being acquitted for, he was not considered a concern necessarily.
Not like a threat to you.
He was not a threat as well. He was not a threat to society technically, and there was a chance he would be let out because his current courtroom issues were not having to deal with a gun or anything like that.
There's no weapon involved. It's more like almost a white collar crime, except there was a robbery involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the robbery was before he had already been prosecuted.
Oh, okay.
So this was just for current issues. He was trying to fraud people out of millions of dollars in Dallas.
He was taking because he wasn't he working in a law firm or
that's what he said he was doing.
Said he was. Okay.
No, he was not. So, long story short, I ended up having to get not a restraining order against him. But I went into hiding for about 2 weeks.
Yes.
It was long enough. It was long enough to make sure he was going to be in jail. I wrote a letter to him. My dad made sure he knew that he was not going to contact me.
Yeah.
And went to the jail and put a block on my number. And then from there, he went away. Yeah.
We know where he ended up, too, because we kept track of that.
Yeah, we still do.
Yeah, and that's a very, very short version of that story. And if you listen to the previous episode, you can already kind of see how something like this would have an impact on you because, we've already talked about there was divorce early on in your family.
Yep.
There was upheaval in that. And so you've often said that trust and security are something that you struggle with because, or maybe the better way to say it is that, worrying that the world is going to come crashing down
right
at any second. Because, you were blindsided by this. There was nothing to necessarily, though you have said, and we can get into this another time, you have said your mom had some suspicions about him.
Yes. So my mom is the reason that he really got caught. But it is a great story.
Yeah.
It's like a 4 or 5 part story. If you really,
is.
Pull it apart. People have told me I need to make a book, and that may happen one day. But
it's almost
right now,
a Lifetime movie. Yeah. We just have to come up with a cool title. But yeah, I could see where, this is something that's impacted you all through our marriage and all through different career choices is that there's always, it feels like sometimes there's this waiting for the axe to drop.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And so how have you seen that generally impact you? Because those are two, this isn't like a tiny little breakup. These are two significant events or a significant event.
It was significant enough that I moved just to confirm that if he got out for any reason because of his crimes being non-threatening to people physically, I went ahead and moved. I think the effect on me, if that's your question.
Yeah, more of a, I mean, when you think about that, okay, not just that you were, federal marshals are calling you and stuff.
Right.
You literally moved.
Yeah.
You had a place you were at, and you
Yeah.
picked up, and you're starting this journey down a career. But now
Yeah.
you've got to move, not because
Right.
of a decision, but because of necessity.
Right. Out of fear.
But your safety. Yeah.
And I mean, there was a lot of fear involved. I think what it really taught me at the end of the day is, as a person, I was too trusting.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had, although it did create situations where for you and I get to a place and I really worry what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had trusted too many people too easily
Mm-hmm.
and needed to learn not to trust.
That's an interesting way to put it, because most of us would not say, I have to learn not to trust people.
Right.
But at the same time, you can see it feels like an extreme response, but at the same time, you can understand why it would be an extreme response.
Right.
It's such a radical and drastic event.
Yeah.
Which you had multiple on top of each other.
Right.
Was it right before or right after that you were deported from South Korea?
That was right before.
It was right before.
Well, I was deported and then I dated.
Oh, okay. You were deported.
Yeah.
I mean, so you've experienced.
Yeah.
I know we jokingly say that.
That's a good story. We'll tell that one later as well.
We'll tell that one later as well.
On missions and how churches should run missions.
Well, and also why you don't go on international mission trips.
Correct.
Because you haven't really had the most positive experiences
Ever.
And getting kicked out of the good Korea is
right.
Yeah, is one of those. But at the time, how did that impact the relationship? This particular event impact the relationship between you and your parents? Obviously you grew up with your dad, so he's super protective of you.
Yeah.
But your mom is the one who held the suspicions of this guy.
Right. So for my dad, it was interesting to see him kind of revert back to protecting me as he would when I was, 4 or 5, like parents would do, kind of grabbing them when they run into the street, all that kind of stuff.
How old were you when this happened?
21, 22.
21, 22. Yeah. So we we got married when you were 25. So, and it was
maybe then I was 23.
23. But still 23, 22, 21. There's not a whole lot of difference in there.
Right. And I was living on my own. So, there were some concerns there for general safety. But my dad really stepped up and even emotionally stepped up in a way I had never seen him, and was kind of the voice of reason when women in general tend to our automatic default is sometimes to go, well, I'm stupid. That was all my fault. I can't believe I did that.
Accepting blame for something that really isn't at all.
Right. And so he stepped up and he really was the sound of reason and logic that made sense.
Okay.
And sometimes it made sense and it hurt, and sometimes it made sense and it made me feel better. But he did not let me wallow in, it was all my fault, I could have done better.
Yeah.
We were moving past that.
Well, and you never want to, while you're processing something like that, you need to be able to have someone who comes through and level-headedly talks to you, which is why you want those relationships with friends and family. You want that confidant that you can speak to.
Yeah.
Because truly, I mean, nobody knows what you would do. I mean, I don't think there's anybody, if you're listening, thank you, who would all of a sudden go, it's not in a handbook of, hey, you find out your boyfriend you're really serious with is a con man who's on the run from the law. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great topic pastorally because it was nothing I ever asked for. And I truly, everybody that was involved never said I did anything wrong or that I was too vulnerable as far as anything that was abnormal.
You were just being a girl,
I was a
dating
typical
a guy.
person. Yeah. And at the end of the day, whether you're in missions or in pastoral care or whatever whatever your job is in ministry, these things can happen and they're terrible. They're awful.
So you have to be able to, and it's interesting that even when you're in ministry and these things happen to you, you have to be able to balance caring for other people, which we're going to talk about down the road.
Yeah,
is experiencing our own trauma as a couple,
right?
And being expected to do the job of ministry, which we love, but at the same time you feel kind of isolated, because you're trying to. It feels almost like you're trying to handle them
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily understand why that's why it's so heavy, I guess is the best way to put it.
And
so.
I was in counseling. I always considered counseling a ministry. I looked at that as a way for God to work through me.
Yeah.
The whole 9 yards. And so it was a learning curve of how to do ministry and have major complications in your personal life, but still love other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, I mean, my mom also, we talked a little about my dad. My mom also stepped up, and she was kind of the person who helped me make sure that I was, not sleeping too much, that my depressive modes weren't coming on, that I was getting out and doing something fun and not just sitting at home, that I had healthy food, and I was, just all those things.
The things you need. Right?
Yeah.
Like she's doing the mom thing.
Right. Right.
The basic needs, making sure you're healthy and well, and your dad he's combating, potentially what becomes the shame and blame and all that.
Right. And it
can creep in.
It really did help my mom and I grow closer. We had several funny stories that came out of that that we laugh about to this day.
Yeah. And you've told me them, and they are pretty funny. But I think at the same time, you've told me that as well, that, through this traumatic experience, you see that, relationships, people can step into roles that maybe are unique to you or new for you, and there can be some healing there. And to be honest with you, when I came on the scene, the bar was so low from this guy that I felt like
I don't feel that way.
I don't either.
I actually
really,
feel like I had a lot of discretion moving forward, and Nathan knows this. I really didn't date for like 7 months after that. There was a guy in between you and him that was very kind and very sweet, and we are still friends today. But he was just not
the guy.
He was not the guy for the future, but I still highly respect him and adore the time we just enjoyed each other as friends and as dating, but it really wasn't a serious.
It wasn't serious. And I could see that, even though ultimately I end up being the more cautious of anybody in our relationship. We'll get to that, to the point where you have to ask me out,
right?
But you have to make me ask you out. You didn't ask me out; you made me ask you out,
right? Because I don't ask out guys.
You don't ask out guys, so you have to tell them when to do it. But I think we both kind of come from that same. I won't say, for me, I won't necessarily say trauma, but there's some hurt in there, and some relationships that didn't go as you had hoped, and so you're a little bit hurt, and you're trying to protect yourself, which I get. But ultimately, what ends up happening is nobody's perfect walking into those, so that's where you open the door for God to work in that relationship and be prepared for that. So,
and I will say one thing going forward. I was thinking about this the other night. For those of you who are listening, Nathan and I will never talk negatively about someone that is not in the room.
Yeah.
Probably, maybe we won't speak negatively about someone that is.
Well, I don't know. We try not to.
I do feel like this scenario that we've been talking about is something that I have proof of, and most likely I will never see or hear from that person again. So it's not something I need to worry about.
Well, and we're not sharing names or anything. So
right. And there's that whole legal history.
So we're not gonna say anything.
Yeah. So
it's your experience, and we don't have to get into the ugly details, or we don't have to do anything like that. But you know what? We're not sharing names. We're not saying anything. This is a person you probably don't know and would never meet. And
but even some of our life experiences, we may withhold some of that information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to protect the people that, even if they're not our best friend, or we would never hang out with them, they deserve that honor.
Well, the point is to speak to the facts. It's not to speak to judgment of people, but it's it's to say this is what happened, and just to kind of leave it at that. So So those are your college years.
Yeah. After that, you and it was 6 months. There was, the big event that happened between when he went to jail and I met you was there was one guy that I very casually dated and went to events with and had a really great time and adored who he was. But that went away.
That's pretty much, and then there's this next phase where we meet, and then
and we'll talk about that
together.
About
that in another session.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that together. So.
But the next one is all about Nathan.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for listening. If you are liking what you hear or want to hear other things or just want to give some thank yous, encouragement or whatever, maybe not thank yous, it's not like we're just talking about ourselves, but maybe some encouragement or ideas, you guys can reach us at thepodcastingleads@gmail.com. Once again, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear ideas. We're sharing from our hearts. We're sharing what we're experienced, and hopefully it can help others. We are looking at down the road starting a Patreon. If you just want to contribute a little bit, if you feel like it, it's not mandatory. We will continue to put these out so that you can hear them. We'll never be behind a paywall or anything like that. But we just want to get better at this. We want to improve what we're doing and hopefully be able to help some people. So until next time, this is Nathan.
And this is Kim.
And we hope you have a great week.